Welcome back to the LD Aviation Podcast. Today we're revisiting a conversation with two very special return guests, Jim Lara and Steve Brechtor, founders of Greystone Advisors. If you've listened to our past episodes with them, you know they bring unmatched insight into the business side of aviation and a real passion for helping leaders succeed. So this time we're tackling a subject that is hitting close to home for many in our industry: why flight departments are closing. Jim and Steve have been sounding the alarm on this issue, not to be negative, but to provide the clarity and tools leaders need to prevent it from happening. Their recent article, Wake Up, Don't Lose Your Part 91 Flight Department, laid out the hard truths. Departments are shutting down when they aren't aligned with their parent company, when they don't speak the language of their value creation, or when they fail to demonstrate their worth with transparency and data. So today's episode will break down those risks. We're going to talk about the warning signs that leaders should never ignore, and we're going to explore the strategies that make flight departments indispensable. We'll also shift gears to a topic Jim and Steve are especially passionate about, and that's the evolution of contemporary aviation leaders. What skills are needed now that weren't as important 20 years ago? And how do those skills protect against closures and ensure longevity? This is going to be an important and empowering conversation for schedulers, dispatchers, directors, and executives alike. So let's get started. Welcome, Steve and Jim.
Well, thanks very much, Lindsay. It's our pleasure to be here with you today.
Awesome.
You bet.
So great to have you guys back. For those people, I think most everybody knows who you are in the industry, but could you guys share a little bit about yourselves and your aviation journey, and what led you to start Greystone Advisors?
Well, let's start with Steve, because he's got an exciting history.
All right.
Unparalleled,
Great.
probably a one-off. So, Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Lindsay. Well, I started my career in business aviation in a very non-traditional way. I don't fly, I don't fix, and I don't schedule. But I came up through the OEM ranks with United Technologies at the Pratt & Whitney engine division and at Hamilton Standard. I came in, I won't tell you how long ago I started my career, but I started as a design engineer on jet engines at Pratt, moved into manufacturing.
Okay.
Before it was fashionable for an engineer to get their shoes dirty on the shop floor, and got into it at a time when manufacturing was making a significant transition from functional push systems to, manufacturing cellular pull systems in the machine shop. So I got to really go through a big transition in how to build, aerospace and defense products. From there, I got some great opportunities to lead manufacturing operations, plant management, and then became an executive assistant to the president of Pratt & Whitney, and then subsequent to that, the chairman and CEO of United Technologies, which became Raytheon Technologies and is now RTX. So I got to see the whole company in a very wide scope. But then one day I got a call from the CEO who took the place of the CEO I worked for. And he said, I have an opportunity for you. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, I think you should come down and see me. So we arranged the date and the time, and I went down to the corporate office and up to the 26th floor. Before I sat down in the chair across his desk, this is the new CEO, he said, I want you to go run the flight department. And the first thought I had was, what did I do wrong? Who did I piss off? And how am I going to get out of this? But I think he was ahead of his time in that he saw, and this was back in the 90s, that business aviation operations do not run on technical prowess only. They need to be run like a business within a business. And he had all of the confidence in the flight department's technical and safety expertise, but not about how they were running it like a business. So that was my charge, to go in and do a big fleet consolidation and a evaluation of the department and prove that it was or was not running as effectively and efficiently as others out there, the leading ones in the industry. and if it wasn't, to change it around. So that's what I did. It was a great experience. And in the course of doing that, I purchased a fractional share with NetJets, got to know Rich Santulli, and eventually he offered me a job, became the first chief operating officer at NetJets. And that was a wonderful experience. It was a time when NetJets was coming over the knee of the curve from sales company to an operating company, and woke up one day and said, holy cow, we have 475 aircraft doing 350 legs a day. How do we do this efficiently? So that was my charge there. And then when that was finished, I took a year or two off to figure out what was next, and met Jim, and as they say, the rest is history. So I tell people I'm living the dream. I love working with flight departments and people in this Part 91 industry. I've never looked back once to my manufacturing days. I love doing what I do, and I love to help others succeed.
That's so awesome. Oh, so cool. I can hear the passion in your voice, Steve. That's so great. Very cool. And Jim, all right, let's turn to you then.
One of the characteristics of our practice is that we don't have any two people that are the same or that do the same thing. So it's a wide variety of talents. And so I've wanted to fly ever since I was about 5. And so I started off with model airplanes and then progressed from there. When I was early in my career, I was recruited by Levi Strauss. You may remember them, people who make pants.
I sure do.
And so I started off in IT, and then I was pulled out by one of my mentors and put into manufacturing and distribution, and was charged with running some plants in the Southwest. And they gave me the keys to this thing called a station wagon, which maybe they exist today. I don't know. But anyway, so I was on the road for about a month driving.
I definitely grew up riding in one.
To be in every plant once a month. So after about a month, I called my mentor and I said, his name was Ed Combs. I said, Ed, it's not working. I'm going to get killed on these roads out here. And so he said, well, okay. So what's your idea? What's your solution? I said, I think I need to fly to all these plants. He said, well, that sounds pretty grand. And I said, no, I'm serious. I think I need to fly to all these plants. I have my license and everything. So he said, well, what do you propose? I said, well, here's the deal. I'll provide the airplane if the company will pay the operating cost. So much to my shock, he said yes. And that was my entry to corporate aviation at the extreme lowest level, because it was a single engine bonanza. And I was in every plant every week. As opposed to once a month, I was in every plant every week, and the productivity numbers showed it. And that was my first hint that properly used, business aviation can really produce some fantastic results.
It sure does.
Then I joined a group of fellows who were avant-garde, way ahead of their time, identifying underperforming companies, public companies, in the wholesale distribution and retailing space, in those two sectors, and then, provided they had a good business model but they were just not performing well, we bought controlling interest of those companies, and we then inserted ourselves into the leadership and turned those companies around. We had to move to every one of the cities, so we did. Wow. And we use business aviation as our competitive weapon to keep our leadership team very tight. So about half the time I would get on the airplane and turn left and was a flight crew member. And about half the time I get on the airplane and turn right, and I was buried in the back with my colleagues back there. So it was great. And it was a wonderful number of years doing that. But it's a lot like ER medicine, Lindsay. It's 100 hours a week. It's 7 days a week. Yeah. And my sweet wife, Darlene, said, Jim, I've had about all this pleasure I can stand. And so after the last one we did out in LA, We sold our interest, and we moved back to her hometown, which is Knoxville, Tennessee.
Nice.
And she said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, business aviation it's either great or it's horrible. It's polaric." So I met a fellow here by the name of Connie Ray, and he had a durable goods manufacturing company manufacturing pleasure boats. And the brand name was Sea Ray Boats,
Oh.
SEARAY boats. So
Yeah.
you may have heard the name. So
Perhaps.
Connie, we met at a cocktail party, and Connie said, Jim, I'd love for you to come aboard and do M&A for us, mergers and acquisitions.
Okay.
So I said, Connie, gosh, I've gotten that T-shirt and wore it out about 10 times now. And he said, well, you're a pilot, aren't you? And I said, yes, I am. He said, oh my God, let me tell you about my flight department. He said, I'm going to tell you 3 things about my flight department, then I'll tell you everything. I said, okay, give me the 3 things. He says, well, first of all, we have an Augusta 109, that's a helicopter. We have a Falcon 50 and a Falcon 10. I said, powerful,
Okay.
powerful threesome. And he said, now let me tell you the first thing. He says, I have no idea what the thing costs. I said, well, that's problematic. You ought to know that.
Right.
And he said, and every time I call out there and want to use one of the aircraft, they're broken. I said, well, that's not good. That's imitating a paperweight. That's not healthy.
Yep.
And he said, and the third thing, which is really troublesome to me, is that the pilots are always whining.
Yeah.
So I said, well, they probably don't have enough to do. So he said, well, would you go take a look at it and see what you think you could do? So I did, and I said I signed up for a year, and it turned into 17 years. Wonderful, wonderful experience, flying all over the world. And Falcons are great aircraft, and we really had a good time. But what we did was we brought the principles of business and the best practices of aviation, and we put those together.
Nice.
And then I started talking to a lot of my peers in the industry, and they had directors of aviation, and they had similar challenges. So about 3 years before I left Sea Ray, we started Greystone Advisors, which focuses on simplifying the business of business aviation and bringing basic business concepts and teaching and helping people grow and helping people communicate with their execs at corporate and so forth. And so we started in 1996. Now, it's not 1896, it's 1996. So Steve and I have been working together for 16 years, Steve?
16 years now, yeah.
Yeah, 16 years. And we bring other specialists into each project as need be.
Sure.
But it's a lot of fun because every day's a new day, and nothing's ever the same. But I really enjoy working with the folks in aviation. I have a passion for flying and for maintenance, and a complete respect for the schedulers, because they are really the hub of the entire organization. That's what scheduling is. And then the flight attendants, for our clients that have flight attendants, they're the best safety tool on the aircraft. So everybody is an extremely high performing and key contributor. And then, of course, working with the corporations to really optimize the use of business aviation, optimize the value, help them understand, help them lead the aviation function, and then help the aviators really integrate well with corporate, and so that they become a unified team. They're not just the folks at the airport. They are become a strategic tool of the corporation. And when that happens, or of the private family, so either one, a corporation or private family, family office, when that happens, it's magic. And it's just a heck of a lot of fun.
Ooh, I agree. I love both of your stories. And I will say, Jim, I've heard the story about how you first got into flying and stuff as well. And I kind of told that to my team. And I thought, this is something we could, this is a goal. We can get we can get to where we can start with a small airplane. Maybe we buy an airplane, we get to go visit our clients as well, because I just love the whole concept of aviation being a tool and how it helps the whole company do their work better, I guess. And I think that's what we're going to talk a lot about today.
But before we do, let us share one story with you, and you may include this, or you may not want to include this. This is absolutely a true story. So it was a Tuesday afternoon, I believe, and we got a call from one of our clients in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, guys, I just got a call from corporate and I need to have a budget put together and a presentation to corporate, and it's got to be done by Thursday or Friday, I think it was, Steve. We jumped in on we operate an airplane. So we jumped in our airplane and picked up Steve, and we flew to Chicago. We worked until midnight the first night and then all day the next day to develop that budget and that PowerPoint presentation. And that aviation director gave that presentation on schedule. His leadership didn't think that he could do it. He could respond in time, but he hit it out of the park. And it was so much fun just helping him. And it's not Steve and I on stage. You know, we're in the background.
Yep.
He's the star, and he's the one that hit it out of the park. We just support him and help him develop what was needed there. So there's an example of using your airplane, responding to a phone call, and knocking it out of the park. True story.
I love it. And just recently, that's so cool. Yep. I really like the behind the scenes piece too, because at LD Aviation, we try and really promote that as well. We are also behind the scenes. You know, you're not going to see us up there doing those presentations, but we're going to have all that data ready for you so that you can do the presentation well. Not as well as you guys. We don't do the PowerPoints like you guys do, but I can give you the numbers from the aircraft hours, etc. So
great.
That's so cool. Someday I'm going to have one. That's my new goal. Have an airplane and fly to see my clients. So.
You know what? Here's a piece of advice.
Cool.
Don't make it someday, because someday never comes.
I'll put it on
the calendar.
I do. I need to add it into my goals and have it
1 year or in 18 months. And in April of really whatever,
I think
we're going to be operating an airplane.
Okay. I will say that. And then you guys help me stay accountable there. I'm going to put not April of 2026, but April of 2027. I think I could do that by April of 2027. That'd be a great goal to work for.
You got to invite us to the ribbon cutting for the first flight.
All right. I will. That sounds so much fun. I have my license, but I haven't flown for many years. So I'd love to get back into it. It's so much fun. Very cool. Okay. Anyway,
so
enough about me and my new goal there. But yeah. All right. So those were wonderful stories. It's so cool to see where you guys started in and how you eventually ended up in business aviation. All of us have really different paths, and I love it. I think that's why it makes aviation so different and exciting. So I think now we're going to start talking about flight departments closing and why do they do that. So I want to reference the article that you had written earlier today, couple weeks, I want to say 6 or 8 weeks ago. And it was about don't lose your Part 91 flight department. And you said, why are so many of them closing right now? That was your topic. So why are they closing right now? Like a broad overview.
Well, we've identified 5 key points that are the Achilles heel of some flight departments.
Okay.
And we'll just give you some key points here, and I'll start off, and then Steve will chime in, and then I'll come back and so forth. So here's the first one. Here's the first one. The flight department is not aligned with the parent company. Okay. Aligned. That's one of those $64 words. Corporate
Yeah.
mumbo jumbo. What does that mean?
What does it mean? Mm-hmm.
So if you ask the folks in the flight department what the core business of their host corporation is, they probably don't know. They think that their job is to fly from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong. That's only part of their job. They need to know what the core business of the parent company is. Second, they've not figured out why aviation exists in this particular company. Why is it there? What value does business aviation create for the host organization? Now, that's best defined by the aviation reporting executive or the CFO or the CEO. But you have to understand how the organization creates value for the parent company. And then you have to define, the aviation department has to define a service model that delivers on that value creation principle.
Okay.
And the third thing is they haven't earned a seat at the table at corporate for discussions and where decisions are being made.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a seat at the table, you're out in left field somewhere, and you'll only hear what was decided. You need to be at the table, helping folks figuring out what the course of action needs to be. Mm-hmm. So when we say not aligned, those are the 3 points that we're talking about.
Okay. And so when a flight department doesn't know the core business of a parent company, like what dangers are in there? Like what do you see happens or doesn't happen if they don't understand that?
The conversation goes like this, or there's no conversation. Because what the execs that are leading the company are talking about and perceived to be important is the core business of the organization. Yeah. If you don't know and keep track of what's going on in the company, you're perceived as somebody who doesn't care. So, I mean, what could you do if you're working for a public company? What could you do to understand more of that? One, you could read the annual report.
Yeah.
Two, you could listen to the earnings call, which happens every quarter, and they're all recorded. They're on the website. All you got to do is listen, and it's going to be either from the CEO or the CFO, and they'll be talking about what's really important in the company. And then you can make a comment like, John, I was listening to the earnings call, and geez, it's really fantastic that we beat the earnings forecast by a nickel this quarter. That's really remarkable performance. So congratulations. Mm-hmm. He'll say, you listen to the earnings call? What else? Really? Was there anything else that you found interesting? And be sure and have a couple of other things written down on your card that you can talk about. But you gain credibility and you gain access to communication when you're talking at that level. It's not hard. This is not hard. It's shooting fish in a barrel.
And I would add to that discussion, amplify what Jim said with another specific story here. That we had a client on the West Coast, Southern California, and we engaged with the aviation director because, like Jim says, we don't take front and center. We put the aviation director front and center, and we're stage left and stage right. But we engaged the aviation director in an initiative to try and figure out the points of value creation for the company. Mm-hmm. And so we met with the reporting executive. It was the reporting executive, Jim, myself, and the aviation director. And we asked who the reporting executive was, the CFO of the company, big tech company. And we asked what creates value from business aviation for this company. And he leaned back in the chair, looked at the ceiling, and within 3 seconds later, leaned forward and said, Asia and back in 30 hours. Okay. So the aviation director almost fell off his chair because, immediately his mind went to, how do I do this? And we said, terrific. Thank you for letting us know. if that is a point of value creation for the company, then we can go back and define the service model that will provide that value to the parent company. And there's any number of ways to do it. You can pre-position crews, you can
Sure.
augment crews. I mean, you could do it a lot of ways. But the point was, we found out just one. This was just one of the many points of value creation that we found out that day, that we were able to go back and tweak the service model a little bit to provide that without burning out the crew members.
Nice.
So it, like Jim said before, it's not just A to B, A to B, A to B, A to B. But we happen to know that the Pacific Rim was a big area of focus for this business. And so, 8K report, the 10K report, the annual report, we help the director lean forward and identify, where are the priorities of the corporation and how can aviation help meet those priorities? And it just, the aviation department just showed up in a totally different way than it did before. One of the things we have to work on as a business aviation industry is perception. A lot of these, Jim and I are in and out of dozens of flight departments every year. And a lot of corporations, and we're not being critical here, but a lot of them look at the flight department as the guys at the garage. And I don't mean that as a gender specific concept, but the people at the garage, but they have an image that they're just like, the black town sedans in New York City, driving people around town, And so does that perception create a seat at the planning table at corporate? No. You just call the garage and, order a sedan to take me from LaGuardia to Midtown Manhattan,
Right.
So the flight department has to be very proactive in changing that perception out there. And in a lot of cases, it's not the fault of the flight department. Let's face it. We in business aviation, and Jim and I have both had operating responsibility for large flight departments, Part 91, for-profit businesses. But let's face it, the way we have raised leaders in business aviation has been very vertical. You come up as a pilot, or you come up as a maintenance technician, or you come up as a scheduler. And so you get very good at talking between the functional groups in the department, but you're not very good at talking outside of those boundaries, like up at the corporate level, not at the level that they expect you to. So that's why, in addition to this flight department closing conversation, there also needs to be on the front burner, an equally important conversation about developing the future leaders of business aviation. So value creation, I think, if I was going to pick one message for the flight department leader of today, identifying the specific points of value creation for your flight department, providing their senior executive team, that's it.
Okay. So this kind of ties it all together. Jim, you talked about a seat at the table and some points of how to do that. Just listen to your earnings call and, show that you're interested. And then Steve, you said recently, or you talked about going with that DOA over to the CFO's office. So I guess I just want to say that I think asking for help, asking for a consultant to help you out can help you get that meeting with the CFO. If perhaps you were maybe not able to, I guess, earn that seat at the table on your own. Would you agree with that statement, and that you guys can help a leader get in front of some of their?
Many times we find that there's an intimidation factor, that the aviation director is intimidated by the corporate executives because they haven't spent a lot of time at the executive level.
Yeah.
And so what we do, we model things like, all right, have you called the CFO for a meeting? Oh my God, I would never call. Have you ever called? Oh no. Have you ever called the executive assistant of the CFO? Oh no, I've never called her either. Okay, so let's call. Are you kidding? Are you serious? Really? I said,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, let's call.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't you call? No, let's have you call. Okay. Now be positive, you know. I'd like 15 minutes with the CFO, and the topic of discussion is the flight department. Only need 15 minutes, and on Wednesday, if it would all be possible.
That's
Okay. Timidly picks up the phone, makes the request, listens, puts the phone down. She said yes. And then that's the start of the first meeting. But
yeah.
it's not emails back and forth. It's a personal connection.
Yeah.
What is what you're doing. You don't send an email, you pick
Mm-hmm.
up the phone.
And I think with these examples, the one that Jim just gave, and then and
Yeah.
it's not us that gets the attention; it's the director of
Yeah.
aviation, and the
What one
perception changes of aviation.
one more example which you may use or not use. So this is a healthcare company. They operate rehabilitation hospitals all over the United States.
Okay.
They're in a growth mode of opening new hospitals. Aviation has a seat at the planning table that they help to determine the ease of access to each of
Oh,
the cities that they're thinking about.
nice.
And so there you go. Aviation has a seat at the planning table on what's most important is opening new hospitals for that public company.
I love it.
And the director had to step forward, and we worked with that director. The director had to step forward with that, armed with that information,
Mm-hmm.
and be proactive, not just reactive. Not
Mm-hmm.
like taking the order at McDonald's. You want fries with that? That's not. You got to get out of that mode and get into a more proactive mode.
I love it. Yeah. Really good points. And I think, so you've kind of given us an overview of what things can go wrong. But let's say you're in a flight department right now and you're trying to see what are the signs of what are signs of trouble in general. Look around your flight department. You said before that some of the departments are not objective in how they advocate for aviation. So can you kind of unpack that a little bit?
Steve, it's yours.
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the problems that we have in business aviation is that we're overly prescriptive. It's Part 91 or nothing, and so we all love, the flexibility, especially the regulatory flexibility in Part 91. And we love going to different places and not knowing where the next trip is going to be. And, that's why we're in business aviation,
Yeah.
for that reason. But we can't fall too much in love with it, because today you've got to look at the composition of companies, and to do that, you got to go back to the beginnings of business aviation, when the flight department was tucked under the wings of the chairman or the CEO, and got everything they needed in a very, hush hush, don't talk about them, but
Right.
they're out there, and but they got everything they needed. They didn't have to be astute business people, and they were safe. Somewhere along the line, that changed. Companies got bigger, responsibilities broadened, span of controls changed, and the reporting position of aviation got lower and lower in the company. And many of the clients that Jim and I have in the Part 91 world, they don't even report to executives who are authorized users of the aircraft anymore. So the reporting executive is not familiar really with what business aviation really does. Couple that with the fact that the most important or the most effective way to provide a service or an asset is the way executives think now. Not just we need to have a flight department. So on the table now are are all the alternatives to lift. We still want the service. We still want the ability to move executives around. But what about this fractional world? Or what about this charter, or what about jet cards, or what should
Yeah.
we do? And one of the problems we see is flight departments do not take control of that dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
They do not. They sort of hide from it because they're not sure how to handle it. And
Yeah.
we understand that. And then and what's happening in today's industry is there's unsolicited proposals coming in from these supplemental lift providers, and they go around the flight department because they
Yeah.
know the flight department is going to, squash it or kill it, or whatever. And they go right to the executive suite.
Mm-hmm.
And then the executive looks at it and says, well, what about that? And they ask the aviation director, they pick up the phone or send an email. They just got a proposal from, some, supplemental lift provider. What do you think about that? And the aviation director is on their heels. They don't know. They haven't looked. They haven't examined. They haven't evaluated the alternatives. And so one of the things an aviation director can do, or someone that leads an aviation operation, is be ready for that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And to know what the options are, to know what their company needs, and to know the different ways that those service models out there could fit the needs of the parent company. And that means not just financially, but operationally as well. The pluses, the minuses of each of the options. So they've got to at all times be familiar with the options that are available, the relative attributes of each of the options, and both operationally and financially be ready to speak to them till the client comes. When the other outside proposal comes, and the conversation should be from the CEO or the executive suite to the aviation director. Hey, we just got a proposal from such and such and so for a supplemental lift, and the aviation director should be able to say, "Yeah, we're familiar with all the options. When would you like to talk about it?" Even without seeing the specific proposal. And they're not now. They're not, because many are not, anyways, because they're not familiar with how to evaluate, those options out there. I think that's a real vulnerable area for the flight department, and they should be able to very objectively take a look at it. With this option, here are the pros and cons. With that option, here are the pros and cons. With the third option, here are the pros and cons, and be able to suggest a new approach or a hybrid of approaches, if you will, that meets the company's needs. In other words, like Jim started the conversation with, somebody that is familiar and astute with the business of business aviation. Here's how we provide the value that the company needs. And it doesn't have to be just the Part 91 all-purpose spread.
Let me give an example of another one of our clients. So they noticed that they were starting to do a lot of one-ways. So they were going out and bringing somebody back in. They were going out empty, bringing somebody back in, or they were going out full and coming back empty. But their percentage of deadheads, and I think everybody understands what a deadhead is, was really starting to grow. So rather than having the question from corporate, the aviation director went to corporate and said, with this changing travel pattern, we need to address this in a different way so that we can bring our level of deadheads down. And so they solved that with a charter arrangement where they're only paying one way.
Smart.
And it took some negotiation, but it's saving the company money. It's a smarter use of business aviation. It's the adroit use of business aviation. And did the flight hours of the flight department come down? Yes. Did the expense come down? Yes. Was it more intelligent? Absolutely.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's what keeps your flight department moving, is making those more intelligent decisions.
And not waiting for somebody to say, hey, how about this? What Steve and I call, that's the forward lean, so that you're in command. You understand what the situation is, and you are taking command of the situation and bringing the rational solutions to the host
Mm-hmm.
organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the director's job.
Right.
That's great. That's great. So when a director comes in, maybe it's a new director and they probably see that none of that has been completed. So then that would be something also that you guys could help with.
Yeah, we help them put together their operating plan, and
Okay.
then they present the operating plan to the folks that they report to.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
here's what you can expect to see from aviation over the next 2 quarters. 2 quarters is 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go execute. And then as you're executing, you report back. Oh, you remember we said we were going to do this and it was going to
Mm-hmm.
save this much? Here's the report and here are the
Okay.
facts.
Nice. Okay. So have you ever had somebody in a Part 91 flight department that's like, hey, actually a full on jet card or buying some shares is a better idea? Because we don't want to have our flight departments closed completely, but I guess my question is twofold. One is, what happens if that financially shows it would be a better idea to go outside of the flight department permanently or full time, 100%, and or can you argue some of the culture and some of the having that in house is a good idea still?
Well, one of the first things you got to do is to validate the economics.
Mm-hmm.
Because many times we found that the supplemental lift providers' economics, how can I say this most politely?
They're not inclusive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they turn out to be not exactly,
Yeah.
and so there's a negative surprise at the end.
Yep.
So then there is the risk of service. So on the peak utilization days, are you really going to be able to get an airplane?
Right.
You know,
Yep.
if you have the traveling exec saying, "I want to see the same faces in the flight deck every single time," okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the value proposition. So you
Yeah.
don't put them with the jet card operator.
Mm-hmm.
You think what's more important here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not an easy equation all the time. You got to take a lot of things into consideration.
Yep.
Would you agree with that, Steve, or would you add something?
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things I did back at United Technologies when I was there, and was given the leadership position of their flight department. And UTC was going through a lot of mergers and acquisitions at the time of businesses and coming and going. And with those businesses came airplanes and flight departments and things like that. So we did a big fleet analysis of everything, and we took a sort of a snapshot of where things were when the M&A activity was, had pretty much run its course, and what do we have here, and we ended up closing some bases. We ended up consolidating some lift. But in the end, we had a much tighter, leaner, more effective and efficient flight department. But
Mm-hmm.
one problem remained. Our analysis showed us we had just a little bit more demand than capacity. And the
Okay.
CEO at the time, his concern was, I'm going to just see another capital appropriation for another airplane come across my desk just to handle this incremental capacity here. And what we did, we said, no, stop. Why not just go buy the capacity that we need? Now, this was
Mm-hmm.
30 years ago almost, and it was unheard of at the time, but we went and bought a fractional share, and what it was intended to do and what it did do was to supplement, and just buy just enough lift that we needed, to close that gap. And it showed us as, thinking in an executive way, in a business sense, instead of just throwing another capital appropriation up there. And one of the problems we did have, to Jim's comment on one way, was we had a government relations office in Washington, and send an airplane down to pick up the VP of government relations in Washington, Deadhead, come back up, live leg, go down, drop her off again, live leg, Deadhead back, 50% deadheads. With a fractional share made sense there in the number of
Mm-hmm.
hours and the ways that we could get. There's always an airplane at Reagan or Dulles, from the fractional fleet. So it made sense, but it cast us in a whole different light than just, up there. We don't thinking that we just fly airplanes. We don't. We use aircraft and the capacity and the value provided by aircraft to meet the needs of the company. It's really a mega trend and a shift in thinking.
So here's a question, Lindsay, that we ask all the time, and we leave this question with the aviation director so that he or she can ask it repeatedly in the future.
Okay.
If this were your money, would you write the check?
Yeah. Great.
This is your business.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, many times folks have said, well, geez, I never thought about it that way. I looked it up in the policy manual. Well, just go to the basic stuff. If it were your money, would you write the check? The answer is no, then don't.
Right.
And I think this brings up another issue out there in the industry is the use of data, and the use of information in the industry. Let's face it, a pilot coming up, is trained in how to operate the aircraft. Yeah. Thank goodness. We need safe. That's what we're all about: safety, safe operation of the aircraft. But there's 6158 checks every year. Don't really train them on how to evaluate the business from a financial standpoint. So right. They have to, early on in their careers, they have to, I think, identify that as an innate interest and start preparing themselves early in their careers, to develop these skills. And that's why development is so important. That not just wait until the last minute, but as you go along in your career to take a look at where you want your career to land, eventually, and to start preparing earlier in your career. But that's where that's just the way it is. But that's opportunity because again, if you've got the right headset and you're comfortable, going out and securing variable cost resources, you can, from someone like Greystone, you can come and buy that advice, turn it on, get it, and then turn it off, and then in a long-term relationship with somebody like us, we know you, we worked with you before, we come in and that on-off cycle is a lot shorter, over time. Yeah. So we have several directors, aviation directors that use us that way, can reach out and bring us in, do this project, help me with that, not even me, work with my DOM to do this or work with scheduling to document processes or whatever, and with familiarity becomes more efficient operation. I think that's what we have to get, aviation directors comfortable with, a lot of them are come up through the flight op ranks and they're type A individuals, I got the airplane kind of thing. And thank God, thank goodness, but they have to build range and develop the ability to say, what, I don't know it all, but let's go figure out how we're going to figure out, how to do this part of the job, And those are the most fun engagements for us, when we can come in and combine our knowledge with their knowledge. We don't come in and profess to know everything about their business. They do, we can help them with what we know succeed better at what they do.
I love that. I love the on and off thing. I mean, how nice that is. When you make that relationship at LDA, we try and do that as well. If you have the relationship going on, I just really agree with there's a shorter turn back on period. Anything that you can just rely back on that previous relationship that you've already had is just going to make that the current project go all the more better. You guys understand how each other's works. And I also wanted to say too, I think it's cool that I'm hearing how you guys are tying all of these things together. You talked about value up in the beginning, way in the beginning of the conversation. And then when we were talking now about evaluating the costs and everything, you have to bring that value piece into that cost coordination or decision. Sure. because it's definitely, I suppose it's difficult to add maybe a certain monetary, but there is a cost to that value, or a value to the value. Yeah, I love how you're tying all that together. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some solutions then. Maybe if you're in a flight department now and you are recognizing you'd like to do this, and you want to talk about some solutions, you want to make some headway. So you talk about some of the pitfalls of leaders that do not talk with data and transparency. Now, Steve, you started to talk about data, but why is the lack of data and transparency so damaging?
Well, it's the language of business. And you can't talk to a C-level executive without talking their language. So it's almost like I took Russian when I was in high school, and but it's almost like learning Russian, or Greek or whatever. It's a different language, again, because of the way that we were raised. But you've got to identify the fact that you need to talk the language of these executives, or you're not going to get anywhere. We see a lot of times that the prevailing thought in some of these flight departments is, if I just throw all I know on every PowerPoint slide and pack it so densely that they're not going to know where to start, they throw that up on the screen when they get the audience with the C-suite executive, and the meeting lasts about a minute and a half. You've lost them. So you need to create, that compelling argument right up front, data-based and very, very specific. When Jim and I help an aviation director with an executive level presentation, the deck is typically 5 slides. That's it. That's all the time you have. And then what we do is we put an appendix at the end of it that if we estimate what the executive could possibly ask, and pack that into the appendix. So some of these spreadsheets and Excel files and everything can be in there. But the main body of the deck, is a story that says, here's where we are, here's the problem, here's where we need to go, and here's how we're going to get there. 5 slides.
Nice.
You need to know the numbers, and you need to know them inside and out, but you need to know how to build the compelling business case. For instance, with your reporting executive, he or she, is a subject matter expert in something very different than aviation, because aviation is not the core business of most parent companies. And so when the other people, the executives that report to your reporting executive, need resources, funding, whatever, they're pretty good. They're pretty slick at doing that because they live in the corporate environment. They're very effective at getting the resources they need. You, as the aviation director, need to be just as effective at making those business cases as well, or you're just not going to get those resources. So I think being very good at knowing the numbers, knowing the data, but being extra good at communicating and making a compelling argument is all important as well.
Yeah.
So we need to move past data, because if you give an executive a page of data, he or she is going to say, "So what? What does this mean?" So we have to turn the data into information that's actionable, and so that they get it. So when we're talking about metrics, for instance, and which start with numbers, we always ask 2 questions about metrics. Okay. Somebody's proposing that they report this as an important operational metric. So the first question is, so what? So what? Why does this matter? And then the second question is, relative to what? How do I tell if it's good or bad? And then once you answer those 2 questions regarding that metric, now you've got information. Now it's actionable. And most importantly, the reporting executive is not thinking, they're trying to snow me. There's a lot of BS here. No, if you talk, information based on data, they will get it, and they will get it in a nanosecond. and they will
Right.
respect you for it.
That's great. So you were talking about your appendixes. So that's where you're putting in the actual probably data, and you're giving them the why do I care up in the PowerPoint in the beginning, especially since you only have possibly 15 minutes, like you talked about before. Everybody's busy. Okay, I love it. Okay, so that's really great action.
One more thing now in the PowerPoint.
Mhm.
Suggested action is
Right.
in the
Okay.
PowerPoint. Don't leave that up for somebody to figure out. You've got an outcome that you want. Ask for it.
Okay.
Think about it in a sales presentation. Can you imagine a sales presentation going forward and somebody not asking for the sale?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
If you got a conclusion, if you want them to come to a certain conclusion, give them the rationale. Ask for it. Suggest what the decision is.
Okay.
You may not always get it, but you're asking.
And this works. The whole process would work for whether you're asking for a new aircraft. It would work with, hey, I'd like to do some charter instead of doing these deadhead legs. It would work in pretty much any case. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
Again,
Got to speak their language.
This is no, Steve nor I work at NASA. This is not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward.
So anybody can do that. And again, with the mentor or a coach like you guys offer, I think that's such a good option.
But we understand why it's not innate in a lot of these directors. Again, they haven't come up, prepared with these skills. Yeah. So for them, it's sort of like when you cross your finger, you bring your hands together here, your thumbs go in a certain position, Now just reverse your thumbs. It feels weird. It feels really weird.
It does.
And that's why that's how it feels to these aviation directors. It feels like they got their thumbs crossed the wrong way speaking this language. And so, we go in and we give them, we encourage them, and we prepare them, and we dry run them, and we get them ready, and they go in and hit it out of the park. But we totally understand, there's no fault finding. There's no deficiencies. Just here's what you got to do in this new evolving role of being a business aviation leader and speaking the business of business aviation. It is going to feel like this, but that's okay. Let's go get this done for you.
Let me give you an example of data to information.
Okay.
I think that everybody's going to get. Okay. Here's the data. Mr. Aviation Reporting Executive, last month, our fuel cost was $3.37 a gallon.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's correct. $3.37 a gallon.
Okay, so
there's silence in the room, right?
Uh-huh.
So the reporting executive is saying, well, how much did I pay for gas when I filled up this morning? It's completely irrelevant. Mm-hmm. That's data. Now, here's information. Mr. Reporting Executive, our average fuel cost this past month was $3.37. Mm-hmm. Now, let me put that in perspective for you. The pipeline price for our jet fuel last month was $2.21. The average posted price at our FBO was $6.27. Mm-hmm. So the expense that we avoided was the difference between the posted price and what we paid. That's the expense we avoided. Now, that's not going to see it anywhere on our income statement because a dollar saved is never seen. But that's what we didn't pay. Now, here's what our objective is. We want to get as close to that wholesale price as possible. So our opportunity is the difference between what we paid and what the wholesale cost is. And we have a couple of programs in place that'll help us lower that price on an ongoing basis. Do you see the difference?
Yes, that's a very clear analogy. Yes, very understandable. And that makes sense too. You were talking about that these the leaders, they come up through the ranks and they've never been taught that. So one, that's kind of how you guys can come in and you can help teach that. But I guess I kind of want to just touch briefly on Has that changed over the last 20 years? Are you seeing some of these skills that that the leaders have to have? Is that different between when you might have started out 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let
Yeah.
me tackle that, and then have Steve tackle it as well.
Okay.
It used to be that aviation was tucked underneath the CFO or the CEO,
Yep.
and the CEOs didn't have time to deal with it, and it was whatever you need, fine. You need a little bit more budget, fine. Just I'll approve it. There was no justification. It was just run the show.
Yep.
Now, as Steve said, as aviation was reporting lower in the organization of the corporation,
Mm-hmm.
that reporting executive is going to have 5 or 6 other business units reporting to him or her.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those other folks are operating business units that are part of the core of the company.
Okay.
And they're educated at a very high level, and they're very good operators. Aviation is reporting at that level and doesn't have near the background. So aviation is competing for time, attention, budget, and headcount,
Mm-hmm.
and they start off losing because they can't compete at the same level. That's what we're trying to teach, is the ability
Okay.
to compete at that same level. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you can't compete, you lose.
Right.
And if you lose, you're gone.
Yep.
And there's another factor too. I think as companies over the last 30 years have leaned down, and shed layers and levels and numbers of people at the corporate office, there's less and less support available for the flight department to rely on up at corporate. So you have a director coming in who does not really have a lot of financial background and a lot of finesse in handling, financial decisions, even creating budgets, but they're asked to create a budget. And what do they get? They get thrown at them a report with buckets, that 3 buckets for the whole flight department, that provides nowhere near the granularity that they need to evaluate the spend in a flight department. The budget, the chart of accounts and the budget is created for very few purchases of huge dollar amounts up at the corporate level. And then they give the same report, the structure to the flight department, and it doesn't work. It's not granular enough because the flight department is the exact opposite. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of purchases at very small dollar amounts. So what we have is a tool called Budget Builder, and we come in and help the flight department director lay out all of the budget categories at the granularity that he or she needs to effectively operate the organization. So we take those huge buckets that are unmanageable, you can't do anything with them, and lay them out in this format here. And that allows you to do 2 things. Number one, it allows you to accurately figure out where your spend is. It allows you to delegate parts of that spend down to your leaders, your functional leaders in the organization. For instance, all of the flight ops expenses go to the chief pilot. All of the maintenance expenses go to the DOM. Administrative and scheduling expenses, go to the dispatcher or the scheduler. And it allows you to develop your people in financial matters like that, which it never really allowed you to do before. The other thing it does is it allows you to, categorize those spends in the 3 buckets that are most important in a business aviation operation. The fixed costs, the facility related fixed costs, number 1. Number 2, the aircraft related fixed costs, and number 3, the aircraft related variable costs. And a lot of flight department leaders, they can't readily identify what those 3 buckets of costs are in their flight department. But with the use of this tool that we come in and help them with, the first run through is a little tough, setting it all up and getting all the data where it belongs. It's a 275 line spreadsheet, very detailed. But once you get it done, with us helping you, looking over your shoulder the first year, From then on, it's a piece of cake to update it every year. You've got the granularity, you've got the budget clarity, the account clarity that you need, and those are the ways that we come in and help by providing tools that are not available from corporate, but that a flight department director needs to effectively run their business.
I really like that you talked about separating the different people and getting them involved as well, because I'm sure that the pilot who oftentimes moves up into the director of aviation position, but the other people in the group, like schedulers, are also not often taught about
What about
that.
us?
Maintenance.
Right.
Yeah. Maintenance, same thing. They're not taught about it. What a great way to get everybody involved and start learning so they can speak that language. I mean, I guess we've all talked about the fact that the more education and the more learning that everybody in the department has, it just makes the whole department rise up.
Not only that, but you make owners out of everybody too. They're familiar with the budget because they see a piece of themselves in it. I helped create this part. I know exactly what went in there. My maintenance programs, the fixed part and the variable per hour part, I helped establish those numbers. So I own that piece of the budget. It really does help a flight department come together as a team.
Yep.
Let's just mention what goes right along with this, that the director of aviation is not the chief doing officer.
Yeah.
He or she is the chief leading officer. Not doing. If you do all of that if you do all the stuff for everybody else, then all you have is a bunch of folks in the audience looking at you failing.
Yeah.
You need, as a director, you need to be the chief leading officer, not the chief doing officer.
Let me give you a great example of that. We were doing an interim leadership engagement. Once in a while, we will do that when there's a transition in the flight department leadership. And we'll go in and run it for a while and then prepare the organization for the next leader and then hire and onboard the new leader. So we were working on the through Budget Builder. We were working on the budget, for the next fiscal year. And we had some questions on training, the training costs. So we called and we had just sort of, parachuted in and, just starting to get our arms around the department and figure out things. But it happened to be budget season. So we had to jump into the budget. So we called the training captain and who had training as a collateral duty, in the organization. Hey, we need to figure out all the training pieces here. How have you set this up in the past between initials and recurrence and things like that? He looks at us and says, I don't know. The former director never asked me. Honest to goodness. He was responsible for training as a collateral duty, but never had input to setting the budget for the next year. I don't know, was his answer. So then what we said, okay, why don't you take it this year? Why don't we work with you and you do this part of the budget?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you could see it, his eyes light up. I'm empowered. They trust me. They trust me to do this. And you bet that's exactly the way we work. And it just energizes, electrifies an organization to do that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't want to be involved and actually make a difference in their flight department?
Right. And then he or she goes forward and says, that's my piece of the budget. I helped set that number.
Yeah. Okay, that was cool to hear all about the Budget Builder tool. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you have other branded tools that you have created. What are those?
Yeah, there's a total of 6. Let me just highlight one of them. And all of these tools, by the way, were developed because we had the same request over and over and over and over and over again from our clients. So one of them is called Crew Count. And this is an algorithm that takes into account the historic flight history of a department or the anticipated flight activity of a department and all of the HR guidelines for that company. So we've got the history and all the HR guidelines, and we put all that into the model, and the model will come out with a range of what we need for both pilots and flight attendants. So since a business aviation is unscheduled, it's on demand. So
Yep.
it will produce. You can't service what you're doing flying wise with less than this number of pilots,
Okay.
but you probably don't need more than this number of pilots.
Okay.
So how
Nice.
how does it compare to what you have now?
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of this model is that you can change assumptions. So you say, okay, so if we had 10 days of vacation this year, what would happen to our headcount if we went to 15 days of vacation? And you rerun the model, and it'll come up with it again. Everybody says, okay, so how about maintenance? Where's maintenance? Well,
Mm-hmm.
maintenance is completely different than pilots and flight operations because it's based on the Chapter 5 maintenance guide that the manufacturer, the OEM, has established. And also,
Okay.
how many arrivals and departures do you have? And are you going to do major maintenance internally or externally? So that's developed separately. But for
Okay.
pilots and flight attendants, it's great. And what this does for HR is when HR gets a request, we need 2 more pilots, they normally say, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why in the world would you need 2 more? We think you got too many already.
Mm-hmm.
So with this model, you are producing empirical evidence of here's what our utilization is, and here's what we need in terms of headcount. And
Mm-hmm.
if we can have 2 more, then we're going to have to tell the execs that we will not be able to service a certain portion of their flight activity because we simply won't have the crews.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, it's awesome.
it's empirical evidence as to what your headcount really needs to be. It's not a guess. It's not an opinion. Here are the facts.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Budget Builder, and I've got to give the credit to Jim here because I'm not the developer of Budget Builder or Crew Count. He is, but it's amazing. It's about 200 plus lines on an Excel spreadsheet again, but it takes the capacity in terms of the pilots you have, looks at the
Mm-hmm.
constraints to that capacity, like vacation
Mm-hmm.
and training and time off and hard days and things like that. Then it takes a look at your flight activity and your demand. And it sorts all those things out and and that's how you get to that bottom of that range based on the match. And it provides an algorithm to match the demand and the capacity because of the on-demand nature of the operation. And
Nice.
because of the fact that it's Excel based, like Jim says, you can go back in and change a couple variables. If we change the hard days off policy, what does that do to our pilot demand?
Mm-hmm.
And just like we talked about before, it provides in business language the objective evidence that you need to make a case. Rather than, going up there and saying, well, generally the industry, I looked it up and the industry trends are 3 pilots per aircraft or this, that, or the other thing. That all goes out the window depending on your own mission specific requirements, mix of international to domestic and augmented crews to, just 2-person crews and pre-positioning and post. I mean, all that is in here, so I would say that it is scary how accurate this model is.
Well, and I really resonate with the HR inputs that you were talking about because it depends on what state you're in. We run LDAs in all sorts of different states. I think we have 10 different states. And every state has different rules and regulations based on how much PTO or sick time everybody can get. So if you have an ability to put in all of those different HR inputs, I mean, what a wonderful tool. Otherwise, doing that by hand would be miserable.
Yeah.
Oh, it's terrific.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Awesome.
And what it does is it puts the objective evidence in the hands of your reporting executive if he or she has to go make the case to their boss, someone higher in the reporting chain in the C-suite there will package it up, the recommendations and the analytical approach to a very short 5-slide PowerPoint. But all the crew count data will be in the back. It gives them the objective evidence to put in their hands and go forward with too. Because sometimes it's just not the reporting executive. The reporting executive has to go beyond his or her own role, to make the case. So it works.
One quick example.
Yeah.
Major public company, major financial company, headquartered in New York City. The aviation reporting executive was the chief human resources officer for the entire globe. He was the aviation reporting executive.
Mm-hmm.
So we ran all this, and it said we needed another. I think it was another 2 pilots. And so we made the pitch, and he said, "I told you no before, and I'm telling you hell no now. The answer is no. You're not getting any more." And I won't give you his name, but he was going on a flight in about a week, and we said, "Before you go on a flight, would you give us about 15 minutes? Come to the flight department. We're going to throw the model up, and you play with it. And you decide."
Mm-hmm.
So we did.
Right.
And he walked in. He said, "Okay, you got 15 minutes." So we set it up, and we showed him how to do the what ifs to change the parameters. 30 minutes went by. He's still working with it. 45 minutes, he said, "Okay, I've run this thing, I don't know, 12 times.
Mm-hmm.
Give me the same answer. First time anybody has ever done this kind of analysis.
Yeah.
You're not getting one person. You got 2.
All right.
And it was you remember that, Steve?
He was one of the best reporting executives we've ever worked with, too. Yep, but it took the discipline of seeing it in the model there to make the case, as it should.
All right. Well, and then that comes down to the data that you're presenting to them in their language that they can understand.
Which becomes information, which becomes a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, that's so great. Okay, so for our listeners, let's talk about what are maybe the top 3 actions that they could, if they're a leader, that they could take today to secure that department's future.
Well, I think the first one is know the value. Be very clear on the value that you provide to the parent company. Mm-hmm. And that's not in your mind, or that's not your definition, but that's the definition of your senior leaders of the company, is to know the value that they expect you to provide. And as we discussed, that's not just A to B, A to B, A to B, A to B. It's Asia and back in 30 hours, or it's this or that, new series of hospitals that are opening. It's knowing the business, but you've got to know the value that you're expected to create.
So then it becomes the service model that how you're going to deliver on that value proposition. Now, here's the second one: communication.
Okay.
You've got to communicate. Here's what we've done. Here's how we've created value for you lately. Here's how we advised on the hospitals. Here's what our contribution was. It's not communication is not here how many gallons of fuel we burned. That's completely irrelevant. It's how have we improved the business, the core business of the organization or the family office. How have we helped and delivered on that value proposition? So that's number 2. So we've got the value proposition and service model. Now communication as to how aviation is working for you. Remember Dr. Phil? What was Dr. Phil's classic question? How's that working for you?
That's right.
How's that working for you? Okay, so I'm the aviation director. I'm going to tell you how it's working for you. Here's the chapter and verse right here. Number 3, Steve.
Well, if I was going to pick a number 3, I think it would be lean forward. Know the industry, know what's happening, know that the environment is going to produce unsolicited, proposals that arc around the flight department, and be ready immediately to respond with data. And the tools that that we've talked about during this this discussion here will allow you to build that case and to know what those options are, so that you're ready for the discussion. If the call comes in and they want to know about this, that, or the other thing, and you say, well, let me go study it, it's too late.
Too late. Sure.
So to build that credibility, I think it's to be ready for the discussion and to say, sure, I'm ready. When would you like to discuss it? Tomorrow or Friday? You know, that gives you the seat at the table. You know?
Let me offer a 3B, which goes right with the seat at the table. You have to develop an executive presence.
Okay.
A confidence that when you walk into the room, everybody looks at you and just non-verbally says, that person is going to know what he's talking about. I'm going to respect that person. And they treat you more as a peer than a subordinate. If you are timid, if you act intimidated, they will smell the blood and they will attack.
Sure. Yep.
And execs are great at that. They're great at that.
Sure.
They are not going to coddle you. They're not going to build you up. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to attack. Because their first line of defense is the word no.
Sure.
Right? And you've got to accept that as the first step to yes. But you have to develop that confidence and that executive presence, not cocky, but when you walk in, they recognize this woman or this man is in command of this subject. I respect them. That's what you're after.
And they've done their homework. They're ready.
Right.
They're
Right.
ready.
You know your data. All of your what you want to say inside and out. Yeah.
But if you're hesitant and you waffle, then you lose that foundation of trust. It's really what we're talking about is trust here.
Yep.
One other thing that this is one of the numbers, but in terms of your presentations and what you say, when you walk into that executive and you're going to have a conversation with either 1 or 10, you have 6, count them, 6 seconds to set the hook.
Really?
Only 6. If you don't set it within 6 seconds, you are done.
Wow.
They will dismiss you. You will be out of that meeting. 6 seconds.
Crazy.
And the worst thing you could say is, thanks for inviting me. I was just reading an article about effective intros, to speeches. And the best way is to say, you know what? I was in Kansas City last week at a this or that a conference, and you know what I found out? I found out that you engage them in a story. Okay. And you've captured them.
Story sell.
Not thank you for attending. Today I'm going to talk about. They already know what you're going to talk about.
Sure. Yeah.
Engage them with a very compelling story.
Okay. That's a really good tip. Okay, I'm going to ask for number 4, but I'm going to look for number 4 maybe towards a scheduler, because sometimes we don't always have direct access perhaps to a CFO. But is there anything that you might, a practical step for a scheduler and dispatcher and how we can get involved in some of these, figuring out what is the value, getting our data all set?
Know the company's business.
Okay.
When you're talking with the executive assistant to the CFO, whose name is Charlotte, I caught the earnings call last week. It was sure cool to hear that, blah, 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 blah. Charlotte's going to say, holy shit. We got a bright one here in the flight department. I mean, she's, he or she is actually paying attention. You got it. That's how you secure attention. That's how somebody's going to, so that you're not just, a lackey tool in the flight department. No.
Yeah.
Do it the same way.
Yeah, I
Good
think
point.
a sister recommendation to that comment also would be to ask to be involved. Get proactive with the director and say, hey, you know what? In my development plan, I want to learn more about budgeting. Can I be involved in the preparation of the budget this year? They're not going to. A lot of them are not normally going to go to scheduling and say, who wants to be involved in the budget this year? But
Right.
that's why the scheduler would have to take the initiative, say, look, I want to learn more about budgeting as part of my development. And that opens the door for a development discussion overall. But then, internally they would see that, boy, this person's got a lot on the ball. They want to step out of their day-to-day roles, which typically for a scheduler go 24 hours a day. We understand.
Yes.
And but they want to take on a little bit more. They want to learn something else. They want to get more knowledgeable on how the department works. So
Okay.
I would recommend that as well. As a leader in an aviation department, and Jim and I have both run departments, large and small. When someone comes up and says, "I want to do this, that, or the other thing," I take advantage of it.
I totally agree. Anytime my people are like, hey, I'd like to fix this or work on this or learn more about this, I
Right.
love it.
So you got to also be in command within the department, right?
Okay.
Here's one easy way. Go to the director of aviation, whose name is Hal. Say, Hal, part of my development, I'd like to run the daily ops meeting every day. I'd like to because aviation scheduling is the core or the hub of the business of our business aviation organization. Scheduling is really the hub. Let me run the ops call every day.
Sure.
And now you become a resource that people are depending upon. And they've already recognized that that scheduling is the hub, but now they recognize it formally. And and you gain more and more credibility and influencing of stuff that's happening in the department. You're recognized as a real player, and here's what happens next. The scheduling leader becomes part of the leadership team of the department. And just with the director of aviation, the director of maintenance, right? Probably the chief pilot and the manager of scheduling. That's your leadership team. And it's not a subordinate role. No, you're part of the core leadership of that organization. Very important.
That's the seat at the table at that table.
Yep,
exactly.
Specific table, for sure. This has been such a great discussion, like always it is with you guys. So, Stephen, Jim, do you have one last thing that you might want to tell our listeners? Anything we missed?
I think we've summarized an awful lot of stuff, Lindsay. You've really provided an excellent forum for these discussions. And I guess the only thing that I would say is, whoever in your listeners has a question, there's three things about me that they don't work anymore. Let me tell you what the three things are. One, my Ouija board is out of batteries. It's
okay.
So 2, my mental telepathy has been disconnected. It's off, and my crystal ball has been it's still cloudy. It's been in the shop for about 20 years. So you got to do one of two things. You got to call me, or you got to email me. And I'm sure you're going to put the
I will.
phone and the email for both Steve and I.
Yep.
Put it there. But my gosh, just pick up the phone and call us. The meter doesn't run. We're happy to talk to you.
That's awesome.
I would second that. Yep. We love to talk to people in the industry, no matter who you are. You're all the same to us. So, don't hesitate. Pick up the phone.
Awesome. I will definitely, I'll put all of the contact details right here below. So anybody who's listening can find them. And I love that. That's wonderful. Because sometimes I think people are like, well, I might have to pay something, but you guys you're just such a wealth of knowledge. I do encourage anybody listening to give you guys a call too. I've certainly benefited from speaking with you guys in the past.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's really a pleasure to be with you today.
Thanks.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, so that really wraps up today's conversation. So thank you again, Jim Lara and Steve Brechtor. You guys are with Greystone Advisors. Check them out online. Really, every time you guys join us, you guys leave me with wake-up calls of, what should I be doing, and a roadmap on how to fix maybe something I'm not doing correctly. So today was no exception. We heard your honest reasons why flight departments are closing, which is lack of alignment with the parent company, failure to take control of the discussions, not knowing your numbers or data, and maybe not listening to your customers. We also heard some solutions, though. Building that business acumen, creating compelling data-driven cases, obtaining some feedback, and developing leaders who can secure a seat at the table, which I love that at the end of the discussion where schedulers can join. So the key reflection Jim and Steve left us with is powerful, really. It's, if your flight department disappeared tomorrow, would your company feel the loss? And if that answer isn't an immediate yes, it's really time to rethink how your team demonstrates value and relevance. So, as always, if you found today's episodes insightful, please like it, share it, and subscribe to the LD Aviation Podcast. Share this with a colleague who needs to hear it. And together we can keep flight departments not just flying airplanes, but running businesses that they truly are indispensable to their companies.